Hello, I'm Henry Neufeld of Energeon Publications. I'm talking with an Energeon author, Dave Black, editor of the website Dave Black Online, and we're going to be talking about his book, Why Four Gospels. Talking about the book Why Four Gospels, in which you discuss what's commonly called the synoptic problem, although really much more broadly, the authorship and the relationship of all of the Gospels. Why should somebody who is not, say, a biblical scholar care about the synoptic problem?
Well, the question is, the subtitle of the book is The Historical Origins of the Gospels, as you know. And one of the things that we do with the Gospels that we don't do with the epistles is we somehow study them apart from the questions of provenance and background and history. If you're going to study Philippians, wouldn't you want to study who the author was, who the audience was, what the date was, what the purpose was, what the provenance was? Yeah, we study all this background information so that we know Paul was writing to a certain group of people for a certain reason. We call these occasional documents. They were occasioned by some event or some problem or some crisis in the early church. We come to the Gospels and we treat them completely differently. It's my opinion that all four of the Gospels are occasional documents. They were occasioned by some rhetorical exigence in the early church. So it would be incumbent upon us to try the best of our ability to try to recover what those occasions were. So that prompted the book.
And so the study, what you're looking at, is what will help us to understand the message.
Yes.
An occasional document, you understand the message somewhat through the occasion.
I think so. People look at this book as a defense of Matthean priority, and I do argue for the position of Matthean priority, but my real purpose is to argue for the apostolicity, historicity, and trustworthiness of the gospel records, which, as you know, those things have been undermined in recent years, last 200 years, with critical scholarship. So I really do believe that we can trust the gospels and that we don't have to make this leap of faith from history into belief that so many require us to do, that because Christianity is essentially historical religion. There is a historical basis. There were historical reasons why we have four different accounts of the life of Christ, not merely one.
And so you also treat it not just as the synoptic problem, synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, but you're treating it as all four of the Gospels, which is in your title, Why Four Gospels. So you would deal
Yes.
with the apostolicity and the historicity of the Gospel of John as well.
I do. The early church did not talk about the four Gospels. They talked about the gospel. They talked about the fourfold gospel. In fact, in our book, we talk about the fourfold gospel hypothesis.
Yes.
Exactly. There's one gospel in four versions. So you and I, we talk about the gospel of Matthew, the gospel of Mark. That's not the way the early church did. They did the gospel according to kata Matthean, kata Markan, kata Lucan, kata Ioannem, meaning according to. We have four versions of one story. The question is why? And there are reasons for that if we study the church fathers. Now, if you don't study the church fathers, you're based solely on the internal evidence, you come up with all kinds of hypotheses. The most common one being the Markan priority hypothesis today, which is often not even taught as a hypothesis, more of a dogma.
I learned it as a certainty.
Well, but it is a hypothesis, as is my hypothesis, the fourfold gospel hypothesis. When you, however, consider what the early church fathers said, which I did, my pilgrimage took me to a Benedictine monastery in West London, in Ealing, and where they have one of the best patristics libraries in the world. And I freshly translated from the original Greek and Latin the statements of the fathers on the origins of the Gospels. And guess what? There's unanimity that earliest gospel was not Mark's, it was Matthew's gospel, which makes sense if you look at the earliest felt need. Where was the earliest felt need for a gospel? It wasn't in the 60s in Rome, it was in Palestine, where these Jews had been converted to Christianity. And all their friends were saying, "You're crazy." And so the early church assigns this task of inscripturating the gospel record to an apostle, who we know was literate because of his profession, his occupation. Some, in fact, call Matthew the note-taking apostle. I can easily see him taking notes while Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount. But anyway, we have Matthew's gospel, and that we call in the book a manifesto. We use the word manifesto intentionally. You know what a manifesto is. It's sort of an in-your-face document, the communist, the Marxist manifesto, the feminist manifesto. We say that Matthew is a manifesto asserting the right of the Christian church to exist alongside of and outside of the world's greatest religion, which is Judaism. And if any Jew is interested in, is Jesus in fact the long-awaited Messiah, here's the evidence, here's the proof, here's what you need, Matthew.
Okay, now, just so people aren't misled, Why Four Gospels is a short book, a bit over 100 pages. This is not your scholarly dissertation on defending, as you said, defending Matthean priority or anything like that. But you're giving the broad view, giving people an outline of each of these occasions. And this is not really written for the scholarly audience. This is written for everybody.
And yeah, the Bible is for everybody. And when you read this book, you realize that Matthew was written for the early Jewish Christian church, and then when Paul begins his missionary journeys, now we need a gospel for a different kind of audience. We need one for a Greek-speaking audience, a Hellenized audience, and so Luke produces this gospel. In fact, we call it the Acts of the Apostles. It's really only the Acts of two apostles: Peter, 1 through 12, Acts 1 through 12, and Paul, Acts 13 through 28. And so we have a gospel for the Jewish Christian church. And then we have Luke come along. I call Luke a manifesto asserting the right of the Hellenistic church to exist alongside of and as complete equals with the Jewish Christian church. The next question is, why, if we have Matthew and Luke, did we need a Mark? And we try to answer that question in the book. And at the very end, we know that John came along in the 90s, maybe around 96, and he was writing, I think, personally, with full cognizance of knowledge of the existence of the other gospels. So he's a supplement, and people don't like to use that word, but I believe he's a supplement to the other gospels, and he gives us a deeper insight into the deity of Christ than the others do. So the Christology in John's is perhaps the highest in all the gospels.
Now, in a lot of these topics, there are some fairly lengthy scholarly tomes, and I'm going to take kind of a 90-degree turn here and say, what is the role, or what is the calling of a Christian scholar? I hear scholarship talked about, you write scholarship as writing for other scholars. But as a Christian, as part of community, as people who carry out the gospel commission, what is the role, what is the function of the Christian scholar?
Non scholae sed vitae discimus. We don't study for the school, we study for life. We don't teach for the school, we study for life. And if we can't take these concepts from scholarship and make them practical on a practical level, I just think the whole effort is futile. So, and by the way, I do think that some portions of scholarship are absolutely bankrupt. It's just a total waste of time. But if there is any value in it, then it's got to filter down to the way that we live as Christians. Doctrine must always end up in praxis. Orthodoxy must always end up in orthopraxy. In fact, I would say the orthopraxy drives everything else. It's how we live that matters, okay? Not what we think. Now, what we think is very important. I'm not minimizing that. I've written books on doctrine. I've written books on Greek. I'm not trying to minimize the place of thinking in the Christian life at all. But if the thinking doesn't lead to Christ-centered, Calvary-like deeds of love to other people, then what good is it? Except to build our ivory tower and our academic reputation as the great New Testament scholar that I am. And what purpose is that? That doesn't bring glory to Christ. That doesn't expand the kingdom. That doesn't glorify God.
So, and how are we doing in Christian scholarship? Do we see, is there a movement right now? I think, because, I've heard a lot of people pointing to orthopraxy, not just you. I mean, I sense a little bit of movement. I'm kind of asking for the encouragement. Yeah. Is this happening? Are people, as Christian scholarship,
I think to a degree. I think on the other hand, you can actually be, a teacher of New Testament and not even believe in Jesus Christ. So I mean, there is this separation. There is this gap. On the other hand, yes, I do think that there is now a healthy trend toward taking our scholarship and making it practical, but I would like to see a lot more of it happen, frankly.
Okay. Well, there's a number of other places and that we can recommend where you've talked about this, and I certainly want to commend the book that we're talking about, Why Four Gospels. And this is an examination of the historical origins of the four Gospels. And we'll reemphasize, you said, the apostolicity, historicity, reliability.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.